care and early childhood education as a public good is the most significant thing that we can do as a community. And then one of our membership organizations said, I don't really favor special districts very often, but this issue is so important and essential to workforce stability that we would consider making exceptions for an early childhood special district. So that's what our community is saying. And so to let you know the issues and some of the challenges, some of these things you may know. We know that 80% of brain development happens before the age of 3, and 90% of our brains are developed by age 5. So all of you on council, your brains are long developed, right? Not that you can't teach middle-aged dogs new tricks, but there are windows of opportunities, and those windows of opportunities, as we all know as parents and grandparents, when these kiddos are 3 and 4 and 5 years old, they are soaking up everything in their environment. So we know that these are critical years. Early development drives the success in school and in life, and investing in early childhood education is effective strategies, and there is lots of evidence around that, and I won't go into all the data, but I do want to let you know that from some of the Heckman reports, who's a national economist, says that 7 to 10% per year return on an investment in early childhood will reduce costs in remediation and education, health and criminal justice systems, expenditures, and high-quality childcare programs for disadvantaged children will yield a 13% return on that investment per child per year. And that's a pretty good return on an investment if we're wanting to do that in the stock market. I don't know that we're going to get those returns. And yet we're not taking advantage of some of the great resources that we have right here. We have too few providers and programs to meet the needs. We know that the capacity, we don't have the capacity to meet the demand. When care is available, it's often not affordable, and so it just layers on top of layers around some of the barriers for folks to access care. We know that this industry is short-staffed, as I've already mentioned, and woefully undercompensated, and that early childhood systems are not adequately funded to meet the needs. There are good systems out there, and there are good data to be found, but really if we could better fund those systems, we could have better data-driven systems that could help us make educated decisions on how to allocate early childhood money into these systems throughout Longmont and Boulder County. And so what we're proposing is a secure, dedicated regional funding stream for early care and learning services that would be supported by creating an early childhood special district that is voter approved to help families pay for early childhood and early care and education programs, expand capacity and quality of programs, and ensure that the region's early care and learning system is meeting the needs of all of our children and families throughout Longmont and Boulder County. So that's what we're proposing. What this means for you as council and also for the community at large is that we want to have access to affordable, high quality, reliable child care and early learning opportunities for all children that will result in school readiness and really, I think, life readiness. Just like we invest in other special district programs like fire protection, sanitation, clean water, and K-12 systems, investing in our early care and education programs as a public good will ensure that all parents and employees in the St. Vrain and Boulder Valley School District and the area will be confident that their children are in appropriate, high-quality settings and that they are well prepared when they enter kindergarten. As well as investing in child care and early childhood education programs as a public good. Like I mentioned, our other great public good systems that we build money and infrastructure into. It will benefit small and large business owners and primary business owners and employers here in Longmont by effectively stabilizing and enhancing the workforce in both the short and in the long term. Some of these goals that we have are long-term goals around capacity building. That's not going to be able to happen tomorrow. But we do know that if we can invest in early childhood, that our community will be better served. And so how does it work? I can answer some questions tonight, but in general, we want to do these things. We have to have a service plan that would be delivered to our local courts, approved by our county commissioners in both Boulder and Weld County. I do want to mention that the Alliance is really focused on Boulder County and Weld County. Not that we don't care about the parts of Broomfield and Larimer and Gilpin County that we serve, but there are other good early childhood initiatives that are happening in some of those counties. And if we can start an early childhood special district, we can expand that over time if we do this well from the beginning. And so this is how it would work, that we are working on strategies that would have an early childhood development special district, that would be the legal name, on the ballot in November of 2023. We would try to generate buy-in and support from local and dedicated early childhood funding sources. We want to hear from families and providers all throughout this process, and we've been doing that for the last couple of years, and we'll continue to do that in listening sessions and more. We want to continue to build partnerships to ensure that we leverage effective existing early childhood funding systems. This is not supplant or replace or take the place of good systems that are already in place, but those systems are underfunded. I'm on my social media and stuff is already coming up about Universal Preschool Program, UPK. So we hear about that. Well, that's solved the early childhood problem in Colorado, right? It is a drop in the bucket. It's a great start, but that is a program that is limited to 3, specifically 4-year-olds, maybe some 3-year-olds, 10 hours a week, 9 months a year. There are not a lot of families that's all they need. So it's a great start, but it is not the funding system that will solve this issue. We're working on cost modeling so we can see what the real gaps are. We've got some great programs. Our Boulder County CCAP program is one of the best funded in the state, and that's because our local Housing and Human Services, Boulder County, has added money into their general funds to help increase those CCAP rates, to help providers to be able to take those CCAP dollars. That is a great program for a certain segment of our community, but it doesn't solve the entire problem for families that don't qualify or lose those qualifications because they got a 10-cent raise on their second job. And so we want to leverage existing funding sources and then create an early childhood special district and plan and campaign to make this a reality in 2023. That's our goal and that's our desire. And so we're asking for partnerships, we're asking for tough questions, and I would be open to any of those tonight, or things that maybe we haven't thought of in this early childhood special district. Do you have questions about that? I can tell you what I know, and then I'll defer to the experts in the room. Maybe I'll pause for a moment and take a breath.
Okay.
Questions or comments?
Councilor McCoy.
Thank you, Mayor. I just want to say thank you so much for your passion. Thank you for, putting all of this together. I myself was a single mom, and I understand the struggles and challenges of the decision you may have to make to, stay at home if your kid is sick.
Yep.
Or go to work. And you can't go to work if there's no childcare available. Then you have to trust your child with someone else. Anyway, we all know, not we all know, but some of us know those struggles, and I appreciate your passion. I've talked to you before, and it's definitely evident. So the question I want to ask is, we know that these teachers are they're not getting paid enough. They're not being compensated.
Yep.
To their value and what they're worth. I don't know if they'll ever be compensated that, honestly. These young kids, they're our future. And we're preparing them for Counselor McCoy and Counselor Hidalgo Faring in the classroom so that they can have sanity, right? So what about the teacher's sanity?
Yeah.
That's one of the things I want to make sure that there is something in this plan for the teachers, because COVID has really brought to the forefront of mental health issues. So although teachers deal with it each and every day and just like, what time we get out, 6:30, 6 o'clock, but they have to go home to their own kids as well.
That's right.
So are there any measures in this program or this special district for the teachers, the educators, the providers to have that extra time off if they need it. Maybe scheduling 4 days a week instead of 5 days a week for the teachers, making sure that they have enough time to get that mental refresh, as we all need to do. But taking care of other people's kids is a hard job. I don't know how many people have ever taken care of other people's kids, but it's a hard job. You know, it's a hard job taking care of our own kids. If you have financial issues and you're living in Colorado with the high cost of living here, and then the daycares are ridiculous. You might as well stay home from work.
Right.
Unless you're making like $1 million a year.
Yep.
Because then you can get a nanny, right?
That's right.
But I just want to make sure that we also take care of our teachers.
Right. Yep, that's one of the key pieces is compensation. We have to have a workforce that is compensated and have the professional development, not only just to become an early childhood teacher, but to maintain those qualifications, to get those professional development, especially around mental health, social, emotional development of children, and for themselves. So professional development in early childhood would not just benefit children, but it would benefit staff and potential incoming staff into the workforce. But compensation, I think, is going to be key. I mean, we cannot address this just by adding more slots and paying teachers minimum wage. That is not going to address the problem. So compensation is key and is one of the core values in this special district, and compensation would be addressed in this special district.
And mental health, please.
And mental health. Mental health for children and for early childhood providers.
Yes.
Yep.
Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you for everything.
Yes. No, great question. Thank you.
Mayor Pro Tem Rodriguez.
Thank you very much, Mayor Peck. And so as it seems by the, I guess, outline that you've drawn for the special district, that it extends beyond the city of Longmont into both unincorporated Boulder County and Weld County. And it sounds like you've had conversations with both county commissioner boards.
Yes.
And since these things will have to go to likely a ballot measure, did you get commitments from the Boulder County commissioners as well as the Weld County commissioners?
So we are working on that, and I don't know, Sarah, if you want to explain the special district part. We have a service plan that it will be submitted to all of the jurisdictions, municipalities. The nice thing was when we met with both Boulder and Weld County commissioners, sometimes they had more attorneys in the room than they did commissioners, which was really good because the attorney said, you don't need to support this right now. They need to go through the process of getting it through the courts. And it was just kind of a sigh of relief of, yes, we have to approve this special district service plan, but it really has to go through the process of what a special district is required to do. So do you want to talk about that for a moment, about the special district process and where we are in that of submitting those service plans, financial plans?
Today, we received the service plan back from our attorney saying it's ready to go with just a couple of minor things added. Next is to send it to the attorneys of both Boulder County and Weld County. Once they've looked at it and told us that they don't have seen any problems with it, then we submit it to the recorder and clerk of the counties. And then there's a 10-day period when nothing happens. And then after that, the first meeting that the commissioners have after that 10 days, they take up the issue and they set a hearing. The hearing has to be done within 30 days. And then they decide whether they will approve, not approve, or if they have something more that they want from us. Once we have their approval, we hope, then we would collect 200 signatures from eligible voters in the service area. It can be from anywhere in the service area. And once we have those, we would submit the service plan and the issuance of the recommendation from the commissioners and the signatures to the Boulder court, the district court. And all that court has to do is look to make sure that we have met the mandates of the legislation, and then we're good to go to on the ballot in 2023.
Thank you. Is there any sort of contingency if one of the jurisdictions does not approve of the special district going forward?
I'm sorry?
Is there any contingency if one of the jurisdictions does not approve of the special district going forward?
Like what if Weld
What
County
if Weld
said
County
no
says
and Boulder
no?
County said yes?
I don't know. We've really thought about that. We're going to get approval from both.
Well, I definitely like that, that attitude. Those are my questions as far as the viability, as far as meeting statutory requirements and getting onto the ballot. I would characterize myself as one of the quotes that was presented, and I'm always skeptical of special districts, but this is too important to overlook all feasible avenues forward. So thank you very much, and
Thank
you've
you.
answered my questions.
Thank you.
Counselor Martin.
Thank you, Mayor Peck. Just a couple of questions. I'm also assuming that this is going to pass. And at that point, with this mission, these objectives, you've taken on a lot. In the early years, do you plan to operate essentially as a grant-making organization to put money where it's needed in pursuit of this, or do you intend to perhaps build out infrastructure as a district, or both? But can you tell me?
So what we do not intend to do is to build buildings. So I would characterize this as the special district is set up to be a portfolio of funneling money to providers and services. So whether it's compensation, professional development, existing systems like our early childhood council, who has a system of data just underfunded. Our mental health partners, there are many mental health partners, from nurse family partnerships. Kid Connects is an early childhood mental health program. We're not naming specific programs in the service plan, but those big objectives are there. In the first year, there would be two things on the ballot. One would be the ballot initiative that we're bringing forward of whatever it's going to be, 3, 4, 5 mills that would generate X numbers of millions of dollars to fund these priorities. The second thing that would be on the ballot is the actual board of directors. The names of the board of directors would have to be voter approved, and we're suggesting a board of 5 at this point. It could be 5 or 7. We're suggesting 5 at the first point. So within the first year, it would be building the infrastructure, establishing the board, setting the priorities, and then allowing them to start to build in, whether it's grant programs or doing the analysis to see what could we actually do for compensation. If we know we have 3,500 0 to 5 early childhood workers, and we could get all of them to $22 an hour, it would cost this. So if we could implement those kinds of things, that would be probably the work of the board, and within the first year is to start establishing the criteria for the service plan, which would be approved, but giving them the flexibility to say, now here's how we want to invest these dollars into years 2 and 3. But it would not be infrastructure and buildings. It might be a single office or two for probably an executive director, a finance person, and then maybe a data person. But so it would be a small staff governed by that board of directors.
Okay, thank you very much. And is the thing a gap that I've been worried about? Okay, and I don't know. We'll see your service plan before we vote, obviously, but is something that you could fund ways to bridge the gap between the governor's 10 hours and the rest of the day? Because I think getting the children from one place to the other is going to be a struggle.
It is. Yeah, so how do we blend? I call it blended and braided funding. That's what I do in my day job. I take funding sources from all the areas, and the kids get the same service regardless of where the money comes from, right? And so it would be that on a larger scale. It wouldn't be trying to house kids 10 hours at this place, bus them over to this place for 10 hours. It would try to be an inclusive setting for families to choose, this is where I want my child, and have it affordable, but also have staff that aren't turning over and aren't turning their children away. So all of those things would be really important in that, in building the system to begin with.
Counselor Waters.
Thanks, Mayor Peck. Is it fair to assume that what you're presenting to us now is the status of the work that you've been doing? And that at some point in time, what you would want from councils, city councils, and other groups of elected officials or nonprofit organizations, their boards, et cetera, or business groups, you'd want an endorsement of this.
Yep.
You don't need an endorsement, I assume, until you're qualified to be on the ballot.
Right.
Once you have an approved ballot question, that's when you would want something specifically from groups like this one. Is that fair?
Yes, because I don't think it's fair for you to be able to take a position on something where you don't even know the ballot question, right? But to be able to do the legal process of getting the service plan, getting all of the legal things in place, getting the signatures, then we'll be able to do some polling to see what does the general public think about this? What would be the best way to put this ballot on an initiative on the ballot in November? And then at that time, we'd like to come back and be able to say, this is what we're proposing to do specifically. But at this point, I think initially we just want to get your initial reaction, things that we maybe should be thinking about. Some of you have probably experiences in successful and unsuccessful special districts and ballot initiatives and elections of your own that I think that this could be really helpful in as we build the process.
You haven't mentioned this, but it might be worth sharing with both this council and anybody else who's listening that this alliance is part of a national cohort of similar organizations. You want to talk about that?
Yeah, do you want me to talk about that? You can talk about it. Yeah, so we're part of a cohort of, and I'm not exactly sure if there's 6 or 8 of us in this first cohort, but these are local, county, and state ballot initiatives across the country around early childhood initiatives. Places like in the South in New Orleans, in California, Georgia, and some of St. Louis. So some of these are city initiatives, county initiatives, et cetera. And what we're learning is that in some ways, Colorado is really a leader in adding early childhood as an option for special districts. Other municipalities have good ballot initiatives to bring early childhood dollars in, but to do it in a way that is similar to wastewater management, fire protection, library districts. We're learning a ton around how we can build this system better because we're a part of a special district. So yes, we're a part of a cohort. They are also helping us with some of the initial funding around the service plan, the financial plan, making sure we're checking all the legal boxes. We're also in conversations with several early childhood local foundations and statewide foundations that are very interested in this. And I'm really excited about Longmont in particular being a leader in what could Colorado look like across the state if local municipalities really invest in early childhood like some of our other partners across the country.
You mentioned they. Who's the they that's pulled this cohort together?
Early childhood
Children's funding
Children's
project?
Funding Campaign. Children's Funding Campaign, thank you. That's the national organization that we're a part of the cohort.
I would just like to say that this law has been on the books since 2019. No one has used it yet. We would be the first in the state to create this type of a special district for early childhood. It's really quite exciting.
Yep.
Seeing no one else in the queue, I want to thank you, Matt. This has been a great presentation, and it is exactly what we need, and I am all for it. You had asked people who have been working with other special districts, what were some of the barriers?
Yes.
Keep the politics out of it.
Yes.
You won't get anywhere if you have the politics in it.
Yes.
So-
What we've learned is that the people that we thought would be in opposition, just like what Councilman Rodriguez was saying, if there is a special district to be considered, early childhood is certainly an area where
Yes.
we might say we could get on board with this because it is not political. It affects single parents, large employers, small employers, city and school district employers, and our whole community. So it is something I think we could really rally around. There is in your packet the one pager that kind of summarizes all of this.
Okay.
The thing that I would say is that right now the geographic boundaries we have defined as the boundaries of the St. Vrain and the Boulder Valley School District, but we are really targeting the Boulder County and the Weld County parts of the St. Vrain and Boulder Valley School District. So That's in your packet as well.
So one more thing, when you go through all of the legal and getting the counties and the filings, everything that you need to do, are you going to present to the different city councils? Because they are the ones that will be understanding mostly about this. That's getting to the grassroots level
Yes.
of people. So,
Yes, we want to do this at every city council
Okay.
within the jurisdiction of Boulder and Weld County, the St. Vrain and Boulder Valley School Districts.
great, thank you so much.
You're the first, I will say. Council,
Well, I'm glad about that.
thank you.
So we're now at first call, public invited to be heard. Remember that if your name is on the list, I will call your name. We need your name, address, and you have 3 minutes. The first one on our list tonight is, well, actually, it's the Longmont Youth Council. So Jenny, come on up with your council, and I told Jenny before the meeting that I have never seen so many students interested in being on this council. I'm incredibly impressed.
Hello, everyone. Good evening. My name is Jenny Diaz-Leon, and I am a community coordinator with the Children, Youth, and Family Division. It's an honor to be here tonight to present to you this year's Youth Council cohort.
Hi there. My name is Stephanie Mao. I'm a senior at Niwot High School. I'm also the vice president of the council. Today I will introduce you to those who represent our Longmont City Youth Council. So those who are reappointed are Austin Brubaker, myself, Allie DeBee, Brianna Loughran, Brooklyn Baum, Brooklyn Goldstone, Emma Milchuk, Greta Weddle, Josh Letsky-Lee, Catherine Twee, Katie Bogdanova, Ming Yao Liu, and Phoebe McLean. Those who are appointed this year are Rima Baisha, Bhupin Jain, Bhushali Jain, Muskan Dillon, and Paloma Delgado Corchada.
Hello, City Council. Thank you all for having us here. My name is Austin Brubaker. I'm a senior at Silver Creek High School, and I'm the president of Youth Council. I'm just going to tell you a few of the project updates that we have so far this past year. Last fall, the Longmont Youth Council came back in person for the first time since 2018. Throughout the pandemic, we kept active with several projects, including Lend a Hand, which members collected hygiene products for youth in need, and we also volunteered with Reading League to support elementary students in practicing and improving their reading skills. Refind Your Mind was a forum illuminating the experiences of a group of multi-generational community members through the journeys with mental health. More recently, we held our annual food drive, Halloween for the Hungry, and we collected over 500 canned goods and donated them to Wellspring Food and Clothing Bank. We're currently working on hosting a new round of grant opportunities to support projects led by youth organizations. The application process was open through January to mid-February, and we're now working on our interview process with that. Another focus for this semester is to increase awareness and accessibility to many youth-specific resources in our community has to offer. We plan to create a resource guide to make it easier for youth to get the support we need. And lastly, we're planning an environmental project in April, and we'll encourage other Longmont youth to get involved to help clean up their surrounding communities. We're very thankful to be here tonight in front of the City Council, and we thank everyone for your time and support of the Longmont Youth Council. We hope to continue growing our team and positively impacting the community and people around us. Thank you.
Thank you. Would you, like to have a picture? We would like to have a picture with all of you, City Council and the new Youth Council.
Everyone has to squish together.
So the next one on our list is Brett Sloan.
Good evening, Mayor Peck and the rest of the council. My name is Brett Sloan. I live at 2307 Tyrenian Drive. I represent the Longmont Pickleball Club and all the local players, and I'm here to highlight an opportunity for more pickleball courts in Longmont. A little background. The tennis court surface at Collier Park is scheduled for a complete renewal this year as a scheduled maintenance activity. The rehab plan is for the tennis courts at Collier Park to be restored as 2 tennis courts with co-marked pickleball, just as the park is laid out today. An opportunity exists to renew the tennis court surface at Clark Centennial Park at the same time as Collier and save some money. Call it a volume discount. As part of the proposed renovation at Clark Centennial, the 2 tennis courts could be converted to 6 pickleball courts with permanent nets, in much the same way that Hover Park was converted from tennis to pickleball some years ago. However, there is currently no money in the Parks Department budget, even at a discounted price, to perform this proposed renovation. Converting the 2 tennis courts at Clark Centennial to 6 pickleball courts yield a total of 14 pickleball courts there and opens the way for tournaments and larger events. Beyond the big events, 6 courts, permanent courts, could double the available play, day-to-day opportunities, and take pressure off Hover Park, currently the only permanent courts in town. Clark Centennial Park could be a substantial draw, not only for Longmont pickleball players, but also for players from neighboring communities, and foster greater use of that park. As long as there's sunshine and reasonable temperatures, pickleball players will be outside trying to play. The Parks Department has indicated that the minimum funding required to sign a contract with the rehab vendor is $20,000, but more is needed to fully fund this project. The Longmont Pickleball Club has initiated a fundraising effort, and I come before you to ask that you join with us in a public-private partnership. A generous council contribution of $20,000 from the council contingency fund would help us get this project moving. Will you join us? That's all. Thanks.
Something to think about. Steve Altschuler.
Good evening. My name is Steve Altschuler. I live at 1555 Taylor Drive. I've spoken a little bit about this before, but it's something that needs to keep being talked about. I feel that our country is the greatest, most prosperous country on earth. First, because we're rooted in the prospect that all people are created equal. This does not mean that everyone has equal portions. It means that everyone should have an equal opportunity. What a person chooses to do with that opportunity is up to them. We're also great because of the twin rules of free market capitalism and supply and demand. An example, 30 plus years ago, I bought a Gateway computer for $2,500, $7,500 in today's money. Now you can buy a phone with 100 times more information and 50 times faster for 1/5 the price. That's because of supply and demand. 60 years ago, McDonald's started an empire, and soon after, Burger King, Wendy's, and more jumped in to compete for their share. As long as government butts out, these systems work really well. But government refuses to butt out. Look at low-income housing, the drug problem, and homelessness. Low-income housing is, we've spent millions for 20 plus years, and the need is bigger than ever. Do they share apartments like I did in my 20s to save money? Try something new. Do they have to attend Front Range College to better themselves and increase their worth, as many others do? Do they have to maintain a C+ average to get another year of low-income housing? And if they don't, then they have to move out. Make them be responsible for their own future too. Don't just take from those who already made their own sacrifices. Homelessness, same idea. Take those truly mentally challenged and house them appropriately. For all the others, have them work for their benefits. They can pick up trash, they can paint over graffiti, they can clean and vacuum government buildings. Having them work will build their self-esteem too. And drugs. What moron really thinks that giving drug addicts free drugs, free needles, and a place to shoot up is actually good for anyone? When you give people anything for free, socialism, most will stop having any desire to provide for themselves. This applies to everything: food, housing, education, transportation, etc. Please try to find ways that those in need can contribute to their own success. To enable them only creates more need and more in need. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve. Ethan? I'm sorry, is it all green? Okay, thank you.
Ethan Green, 930 Button Rock. I'm here to speak on the issue of Denver Broncos funding for youth activities. I commend you for slowing down and taking a more methodical and deliberate approach in order to get the process right and clarify the city's priorities rather than throwing the money at the first bright and shiny object that comes along. Now there's a proposal on the table for $500,000 plus another $1 million for the Longmont Museum. And I was curious about this, so I did some research. I'm here to report my findings or lack thereof. First, I could find no evidence that this proposal has been approved by the Museum Advisory Board. While it was mentioned in passing by the museum director during a Museum Advisory Board meeting, there was no discussion, let alone approval by the board. I think that's a problem. It would seem to be best practice in terms of due diligence for this funding to be vetted and approved by the Museum Advisory Board before it comes to council. That is, after all, their proper advisory role. Second, I could find no documentation whatsoever for how the $1.5 million would be spent, no detailed budget request, let alone line item budget. I submitted a public record request for this information. I received nothing back except for reference to the Ward 1 councilor's verbal request for the funding. So it appears that the $1.5 million will be a blank check, and this is another problem because while I do think the Longmont Museum is a fantastic institution, it is already a very well-financed institution with full-time development staff, and there should at least be a decent level of oversight and expectations set for specifically how this funding will be used, because it's a lot of money and it matters to the community that gets used in the best possible way to benefit Longmont's youth. And right now it's not clear to myself or to the public why the museum needs another $1.5 million on top of the already quite substantial budget. So I would urge the council to consider taking another deep breath and flesh out in writing the details of exactly how the proposed $1.5 million will be used, and then take the proposal to the Museum Advisory Board for feedback and potential approval, so that by doing this due diligence, the public will have more confidence that this is a beneficial expenditure. And if you prefer not to go through a process of accountability and transparency for the $500,000 of Denver Broncos money plus another $1 million, then I would urge you to release the money to the community for local nonprofit funding through the established RFP process. Thank you.
Thank you, Ethan. Lance Whitaker?
Mayor and Council. My name is Lance Whitaker. I live at 1750 Collier Street, as some of you have committed to memory now. I'm in support of House Bill 191230 in Longmont. Just looking for a permit and a license on that. Today is National Chocolate Souffle Day, and I know that's what you're all looking for, is the national day for me, and it is Chocolate Souffle Day. So enjoy your Chocolate Souffle Day, and no more fighting during Valentine's Day, please. Thank you. Have a nice day.
Thank you, Lance. Strutter Benston?
Hey, I'm Strider Benston, 951 West 17th Avenue. I loved hearing that presentation a while ago about the child when I was 4 or 5 years old, I did go half day to kindergarten, but mostly there were 3 girls in my neighborhood who had a little school in their garage, and I learned. I was reading 4th grade level before I started school, so those things really can be significant. Let me mention, people know about Head Start, but that began with the Child Development Group of Mississippi in 1966, I think, with Fannie Lou Hamer created that. And then it went upstairs to Washington and became Head Start, and a lot of good things with it, but it lost the connection with the grassroots. And something like this being here, if they keep community people actively involved in it, it can be the kind of blend that creates real democracy, real community. And we're losing that on the national level, where you got hate groups that are taking over political parties and going into Marjorie Three Names from Georgia said, let's divorce the states. Well, that's exactly what happened in 1861. It's called a civil war. And we are facing the same type of ideology, the same type of racism, the same type of hatred. And the gun thug thing is absolutely out of any human realm. As far as the great glories of capitalism, when there were strikes in the textile industry up in the Northeast, they moved down south where people had no rights, no right to vote, no right to anything. And in the mills in North Carolina, the wages were down to a penny an hour. There were children 8 to 15 years old working in the mills in North Carolina as much as 85 hours a week, and their wage was 58 cents a week. And that was for the white kids. Black kids were all had to pick cotton and tobacco out in the fields. And I was dealing with the same thing in Alabama. 14 hours a day for a 14-year-old girl picking cotton. Thank you.
I always look forward to this history lesson that you bring to us. Thank you. Seeing no one else on the list, I'm going to close public invited to be heard. Are we okay? Do we need a bio break, anyone? No? Okay, we'll move on to the consent agenda. Dawn, would you mind reading the items into the consent agenda?
Absolutely, Mayor. Item 9A is Resolution 2023-08A, a resolution of the Longmont City Council adopting the City of Longmont Emergency Operations Plan. 9B is Resolution 2023-09, a resolution of the Longmont City Council approving the intergovernmental agreement between the city and the Longmont Housing Authority for American Rescue Act funding for the Zinnia Permanent Supportive Housing Project. 9C is Resolution 2023-10, a resolution of the Longmont City Council approving the intergovernmental agreement between the city and the Longmont Housing Authority for American Rescue Act funding for the 1764-1780 Hover Street Affordable Housing Project. 9D is Resolution 2023-11, a resolution of the Longmont City Council approving the intergovernmental agreement between the city and the Longmont Housing Authority for support and services. 9E is Resolution 2023-12, a resolution of the Longmont City Council approving the First Amendment to the intergovernmental agreement between the City of Longmont and the County of Boulder for transportation projects on State Highway 66 and East County Line Road. 9F is Resolution 2023-13, a resolution of the Longmont City Council authorizing agreements between the City of Longmont and Stephen D. Tebow for the purchase of real property at 11 South Main Street for the First and Main Transit Station Facilities Project. 9G is Resolution 2023-14, a resolution of the Longmont City Council approving the intergovernmental agreement between the City of Longmont and St. Vrain and Left Hand Water Conservancy District for the Water Conservation Program expansion. 9H is Resolution 2023-15, A resolution of the Longmont City Council accepting a grant from the El Pomar Foundation to be used by children, youth, and families for mental health awareness and parent education services. 9I is Resolution 2023-16, a resolution of the Longmont City Council approving the intergovernmental agreement between the city and the Regional Transportation District for fare reimbursement on the Longmont local routes and accessoride services. 9J is Resolution 2023-17, a resolution of the Longmont City Council approving the intergovernmental agreement between the city and the Longmont Downtown Development Authority for support and services. 9K is approval of the Longmont Youth Council appointments for 2023. And 9L is approve for capital improvement program amendments.
Thank you, Dawn. That was a long list. It looks like Councilor Martin would like to pull something.
Yes, I would like to pull item 9A, please.
Okay. Okay. Councilor Hidalgo Faring.
Thank you, Mayor. I'd like to pull item 9H.
Seeing no one else in the queue, can I have a motion to move the consent agenda?
I'll move the consent agenda item minus A and H.
Thank you. All right, so the consent agenda has been moved by Councilor Hidalgo Faring, seconded by Councilor McCoy. Let's vote. Spinning wheel of death. Aha. So the consent agenda passes unanimously. All right. We are now at ordinances on second reading and public hearings on any matter. The first ordinance is 0A0-2023-07, a bill for an ordinance making additional appropriations for expenses and liabilities of the City of Longmont for the fiscal year beginning January 1st, 2023. Do we have any questions from council on this ordinance or this bill? Seeing none, is there any, I'll open it up to public hearing. Is there anyone in the public that would like to address this bill? Seeing none, can I have a motion to pass 2023-07? So it's been moved by Councilor McCoy, seconded by Councilor Martin. Let's vote. That passes unanimously. Number B is 0-2023-08, a bill for an ordinance conditionally approving the vacation of a portion of berm easement within the Clover Basin Farm, filing number 3 final plat, generally located northeast of Kennedy Drive. Are there any questions from council on this ordinance? I'd like to open it up to the public. Is there anybody from the public that would like to address this ordinance? Seeing no one, I will close the public comment period. Can I have a motion?
I'll move ordinance 2023-08.
So it's been moved by Mayor Pro Tem Rodriguez, seconded by Councilor McCoy. Let's vote. And that passes unanimously. C is 0-2023-09, a bill for an administrative ordinance approving the contract to buy and sell real estate conveying Lot 1, St. Vrain Industrial Park, second filing, replat C, also known as 1140 Boston Avenue, to Wholesalers Property Company, LLC. Are there any questions on this ordinance from council? Seeing none, I'll open up the public for questions or comments on this ordinance. Seeing none, I'll close the public comment section. May I have a motion?
I move ordinance 2023-09.
So it's been moved by Mayor Pro Tem Rodriguez and seconded by Councilor Martin. Let's vote. And that passes unanimously. So that is it for our items on this second reading. We'll now go to the items removed from the consent agenda. Councilor Martin, you removed A. Oh, I'm sorry.
Thank you, Mayor Peck. Because a few weeks ago, we did have in another jurisdiction far away, thankfully, a hazardous materials disaster, and questions were raised about the local and otherwise response. I got a few letters asking, well, how's our emergency response doing? And because of that, I read this very carefully and have a few questions about what it means. In particular, in the Emergency Operations Plan number 1, it says ranked hazards identified in the 2022 City of Longmont THIRA. Is that what we say? THIRA? Thank you. Include. And then it's got a long list, and I noticed that all of these things are really good things to have on your emergency response list as far as I am concerned, but I'm not sure how something gets on the list. Is it because we did an assessment of hazards and found our response plan wanting? Or whether are these new things that we don't have a response plan for? Or is it just time to reassess those things? I would just like to know how something makes the list.
Good evening. My name is Dion Fenning. I'm the director of the Office of Emergency Management. So to your question regarding the THIRA, it is a process that we go through. It's done by federal guidelines provided by Department of Homeland Security and Federal Emergency Management Agency, where we do take a look at historical record in the city, as well as some other factors, looking at what's happened historically, what are some of the hazards we think we face, what does the science tell us about hazards that we can have in our city, and then we look at a lot of risk factors. What is the potential if that happens? What kind of impacts could it happen to the city and to our residents if it happens? It's taken before our emergency coordination team here in the city, which includes many of our stakeholders and external partners to the city and partners to the program of emergency management. And we talk about it. We discuss what those impacts could be, different measures that we could take to mitigate those, different processes we go through to respond to them, and then they are ranked based on kind of a risk formula. What is, number 1, number 2, so on and so forth. Doesn't mean that we only plan for the top 1, 2, 3. We develop our plans to be all hazard plans. So that way, no matter what happens, we have the right processes in place, we have the right partnerships and plans developed to respond to those items. So just because an item is further down the list doesn't mean that it's not something that we take into consideration.
Okay. So, for example, on the 2021 list, I see flood, just for an example. And I'm assuming that since it's not on the 2022 list, it means that the 2021 list is 2021 list is still okay. Is that what that means?
It just means that maybe different information has come to light or different opinions of the group maybe shift an item in the list. Doesn't mean that it's not a hazard that we don't consider, and that's part of the reason why we wanted to include the lists from previous years in this plan. So it's not that we're only taking into consideration the plans for 2022. We are looking at past hazards as well, and this plan really essentially takes into account all of those items. So it's just a matter of the discussion that we have. Some things rise to the list, some things fall over time. it's just, we take a look at it holistically of what we've taken a look at in the last 3-4 years.
Okay, so I think that means the answer to my question is yes.
Yes.
We still have a flood plan. It just didn't make the list for review this year.
Yes, it's, in fact, it's there, number 4, and the flood is for
Oh,
2022.
I'm sorry, it did.
Yep, no,
That
it's okay.
bad example, but yes.
Yep.
Okay. Domestic terrorism, I actually got several letters about that, because people were worried about attacks on the grid, particularly. It's been a thing nationwide. So I just wanted to say I'm glad to see that. I don't want any details about that because I'd rather that nobody knew. But hazmat incident, of course, is the one that everybody's asking about. And can you tell us a little bit about that plan in terms of, what your reactions, the local reaction, then the adjacent jurisdiction reactions and stuff, and what our expectations are?
Yeah, our hazmat plan largely falls into the fire department, so I'll let Chief Artis speak to that.
Zach Artis, Public Safety Chief for the City of Longmont. Councilman Martin, we have a regional hazmat response team. The trucks and everything are actually housed here in the City of Longmont. So we have a very robust program, a very training program. Just to give you an idea, all of our new hirees reach the level of hazmat tech, which is the highest that you can reach as far as dealing with hazardous materials and hazardous spills and those types of things. So from an operational standpoint, all of that is handled with fire. When we talk about the Office of Emergency Management, they come in to support. So whether or not we had to look at moving and evacuating folks from an area because maybe we had an ammonia cloud of some sort, then OEM steps in and helps with sheltering and activating some of the additional response protocols, not the actual operation of handling the spill or handling whatever the chemical substance is. Again, that is a fire operation, and depending on what it is, and based on what the ERG book tells us what we need to do in distances, OEM comes in to support those, whether it's operational, they need food, we need clothing, we need shelter, activating Red Cross, a variety of those types of things is where the Office of Emergency Management fills in on these types of hazards.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
That is a good answer. I have one quick question more, which is about fracking. I have many constituents who want lots of reasons to make the state rulemaking about fracking regulations move faster. And earthquakes in other places have been a serious concern. Colorado is pretty seismically calm here. Can you tell me about what the process you used to decide that earthquakes due to fracking, we don't have any fracking in Longmont anymore, but we have some really nearby fracking. So what process did you use to decide to put that response plan on the list?
So I can speak just generally what we look at, and this is not the first city or state that I've been involved in with we created an OEM plan. What we look at is what the top hazards that our community could face. And we make a decision on that. I mean, we could build plan after plan to deal with meteorite strikes and a variety of different things. But what we do is we look at what we believe will directly affect our community, I guess, either frequently or what we could really look at. So for an example, if you'll notice in 2021, wildfires are a little bit further down the list. After the Marshall Fire, now 2022, those wildfires are up above and higher on the list. So we look at what natural causes or man-made things that we believe would affect us. So for an example, let's say we had a chemical plant here that produced very toxic and hazardous chemicals. That would probably be higher on the list for us because we would have to deal with that in case there was a spill or an issue. So again, not everything makes the list that could possibly happen. Again, I don't think the tornadoes are on here. They may be classified under some of the different types of weather. But you do see earthquakes are here. They're a little bit, earthquakes due to fracking is a little bit lower on the list, but it is here. So again, we're looking at what the possibility, and Dion, correct me if I'm wrong, we're looking at what the possibility that our community could be directly affected with, and those are the things that we're focusing on the resources on. Again, if a meteorite struck, we would have to consider it and on the fly, but we would take some of the same processes that we're currently doing and still apply it to that, either on an operational side or for the Office of Emergency Management coming in to support that operation.
And the question that I must ask, does BNSF tell us when they're moving hazardous materials through the city?
I'm not aware unless you are.
I think they do have communication with our fire department. I don't know if they communicate with every single train load, but they do. There's a partnership and communication that happens there.
All right, thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
So, Counselor Martin, do you want to move that consent item agenda? Yes.
Off. I thought we were going to do Susie's first too. Yeah, I move adoption of acceptance of item 9A, please.
Okay, so 9A has been moved to accept by Counselor Martin, seconded by Counselor McCoy. Let's vote, please. So that passes unanimously. Counselor Hidalgo-Faring, you moved H? Or pulled H, I'm sorry.
So predominantly, I wanted to congratulate you all on this grant. This is much needed work. I do have a question. So the grant is focusing on the Lanyon, Kensington Park areas for mental health support. It had noted the promotora model. I just wanted to kind of highlight that, make it public, and explain what does that model look like.
Good evening, Mayor Peck, members of the council. Christina Pacheco, Human Services Director for the City of Longmont. Yes, thank you. We are excited to work on this grant. The Promotora model is a model that utilizes cultural brokers within the community to work with community members. So we have 3 parent education facilitators who have worked in the community for years, bilingual, bicultural individuals who are going to work directly with parents in the neighborhoods to facilitate the circle of, I need to get this right, the circle of security parent education. Parenting programs. So we're going to focus through our neighborhood impact model, focus on those two neighborhoods. We know that focusing on census tract neighborhoods that were disproportionately impacted through COVID will get the biggest bang for our buck, and the El Pomar Foundation was really interested in that, so we're really excited to have this opportunity.
Yes, I'm really excited. As a 3rd grade teacher, my students this year, they were in kindergarten when we went into shutdown. And when, I've heard people discuss, oh, well, we don't know what the impacts, well, I can tell you what the impacts are, and it's very severe. I think, I'm coming to my 30 years of public and private education, and every year since COVID, it's getting a little more challenging, and a lot of it is just the impacts, trying to get kids back to where we were to pre-COVID.
Exactly.
It is really challenging, and this kind of work needs to be highlighted, commended, and congratulated. So thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah. So, yep, I'll move resolution 2023-15.
So that's been moved by Counselor Hidalgo-Faring, seconded by Counselor Yarbrough. Let's vote, please. That passes unanimously. Thank you. We are now at the general business portion of our agenda, and I move that we recess as the Longmont City Council and convene as the Board of Directors of the Longmont General Improvement District Number 1. So that has been moved by myself, seconded by both Counselor Martin and Counselor McCoy. You get to choose, Dawn. Let's vote, please. That passes unanimously. There's a resolution here, R-LGID-2023-01. It's a resolution of the Board of Directors of the Longmont General Improvement District Number 1 approving an intergovernmental agreement with the Longmont Downtown Development Authority for general administrative services. I would open up to the counselors if you have any questions or comments. Seeing none, I'll open this up to the general public if you have any comments or questions about this resolution. Seeing none, I'll close the public comment. Let's vote.
I move resolution LGID 2023-01.
Thank you.
I'll second.
So that's been moved by Mayor Pro Tem Rodriguez, seconded by Councilor Hidalgo Faring. Let's vote, please. That passes unanimously. So I move that we adjourn as the Board of Directors of the Longmont General Improvement District Number 1 and reconvene as the Longmont City Council. Thank you. I moved that, and it was seconded by Councilor Waters. Let's vote. That passes unanimously. Thank you. We have 4 more items on our general business. The second one is financial securities requirements for development of projects, proposed changes to the administrative process.
Mayor, before Don starts his presentation, I did want to take you back to, we had a work session late last year where we talked about affordable and attainable housing and the different issues that are impacting us in terms and when we're trying to build that housing and the potential cost implications. And one of the items that we did present to you all to talk about was looking at securities and how we approach that situation. And council did, that was one of the areas that you did direct us to bring something back to you. We've got a host of issues that you're going to start seeing in the next month or so. And the work that we've been doing, this is the first one. And so, Don, I just wanted to sort of anchor back into what created this conversation.
Thanks, that helps a lot.
Mayor Peck, members of council, Don Burchett, planning manager for the city of Longmont, here again to talk to you tonight about the financial security requirements that we have in our land development code. These are a administrative process that is handled by staff in various departments. There was information more detailed in your packet. I'm going to try and be brief on my presentation, but try to make sure to give everybody at home and those folks sitting here in the audience some information about how we handle this and what the changes are. And then if you would like additional details after I finish my presentation, I'm happy to go back and provide more if the council needs that information. So as started out, just briefly, again, this is an administrative process. The city's land development code requires financial securities for development projects when we go and approve them to secure the public improvements that are constructed by the developer. This process is handled again administratively with city staff. We oversee the collection of those funds, the holding of those funds both through the finance department and through our administrative staff and the Development Services Center. And then ultimately we work with our construction acceptance group to make sure that the improvements are completed and then ultimately return those funds. And so from the standpoint of a staff involvement, it is very time intensive. We touch a lot of money and we touch it many times, and some of the improvements that we're recommending would definitely be savings to staff in our time, as well as we believe a benefit to the development community and potentially could serve as some incentives that the council could offer up when working with public-private partnerships and affordable housing. So I'll go through those briefly tonight. Just to give everybody a highlight of the recommendations that we've made in the council comm, we have 3 that we're asking for the council to for sure hopefully direct us to bring back, and those are on the left side under the recommended ones. First is that we would base our securities on median construction costs based on the development type that we're securing for. So whether it's single-family apartments or mixed use, we would base those securities on the median cost that staff has determined based on the history of 2 years of taking securities for these types of projects. Second is that we would delay the collection of these securities until we actually are ready to issue building permits. And I'll get into that process that we currently have to show the council and everybody in the audience how we currently do that. And then ultimately, number 3, we want to make sure that we have the ability to place liens on the property should we need to go in and do any work to secure a site and to make sure that the city is made whole. And those are the recommended ones. The other optional ones that we've identified for the council to consider would be to exempt city projects. So if we're going to build a city project and we have public improvements associated with that, we've already had the money in the budget. We technically have to securitize that. It just seems kind of silly to have to track monies in multiple different places. We're recommending exempting city projects from those securities requirements. We're proposing to allow the city council to waive or modify securities as a incentive for public-private partnerships. That would have to be approved by the council when they were looking at a public-private partnership and in a development agreement. And then finally, we're looking at allowing for reductions in securities for affordable housing projects that build affordable housing and that qualify for fee waivers, that they would be able to reduce the amount of their securities equal to the amount of the fees that are waived for the affordable project. And so that's kind of an outline of where I'm going. All right, so background, people may be wondering, well, what are these securities and what are they for? So again, the securities itself are either cash or a letter of credit, irrevocable letter of credit that the city acquires from the development community before we can approve their project. It's meant to make sure that those public improvements are actually constructed per the approved plans so that we make sure that what was approved in those documents is actually constructed. The public improvements that we're securing, we're looking at our roads, our sidewalks, water sewer lines. We're also looking at greenways, and we're also looking at some of our landscaping requirements along our major arterial streets. These are typically the public improvements that are securitized when we hold monies for and from a developer. What you have on the screen right now is the process for how we handle money. In the blue is basically the process for when we acquire the money, at what step, and then the process that the city goes through before we release it on the right-hand side in the blue. In the light gray in the middle of the screen is when we collect funds from the development community right now, and how we reduce and release those, and so the number of touches that we have internally. And then on the bottom is the private improvement way that we secure those. So pocket parks, other open space within developments, playgrounds, things like that that are going to be provided. I'm not proposing any changes to the private improvement security process. We did that a number of years ago. That's worked very well for us. We're actually proposing to try to match the public improvement process to what we currently do with these private improvements. So the proposed changes that we're looking at, again, I'm not going to read through them again, but we're proposing that there are 3 that we'd really like to have on the left side that we think would definitely improve our process, and then optional ones for the council to consider are the 3 on the right as incentives and other ways to save money for the city. So what would change? So unfortunately my slide shifted a little bit, so forgive me for the S dropping there. What we would be looking at with this process then is that currently under the current system, when we approve a plan for development, we would get securities and we would hold those at that time before development even starts. So that would be development of the public improvements. So that would be, again, your roads, your streets, your water sewer lines, any of the public improvements that we're going to own and maintain after the development is completed. And the proposal is that we will now, instead of collecting those at time of final approval of the plans, that we would actually collect those when we grant construction acceptance and we are ready to release building permits. Construction acceptance is a term that we use where after a developer has gone in and they have put the infrastructure in the ground, our crews have gone out and inspected it and determined that it is actually functioning and meets our standards, and we can allow residents to start living in homes that would get constructed in this area, or in apartments, or in a mixed-use building. So we are ensuring at that point that they work. The amounts that we would hold under construction acceptance as proposed is that for single family, we would now base it on a per acre of land area that they're going to develop that they want permits for at $17,650. For multifamily apartments, condos, we would securitize those at $1,093 per unit that they want for their building permits. And then under the mixed use scenario for a building, think of like First and Main, South Main Station, that would be secured at $12,213 per acre of development site. We would get those again at the time we believe the risk is there for something to go wrong, and to ensure that those improvements are going to be warranted for the 12 months that is required by code before we take them on and own them. So after we have gone through the warranty period, they have made any corrections or repaired anything that's been damaged during that 12 months, we would then release those securities.
Second. So when Don talks about, I'm going to take this down, actually take it a little bit higher level. When they're building the horizontal infrastructure, when he says construction acceptance, that's what gives them the ability to go on the vertical infrastructure, to actually build the houses or the units that they're talking about. So in this case, what they're recommending, if it's not where they need it, they can hold the vertical piece so that they get what they need. It's when they give them the ability to start going vertical, where you will issue certificates of occupancy at the end of it. That's actually when they pay the securities.
And again, the goal in all of this is that under the current system of public improvement, we are getting funds from a developer before any construction has even started. And we have to have those in place before we can approve their project that then they can take to the bank. So that's one hurdle. Then we have to track that money all the way through the construction period and then through the warranty period. So the timing is twice as much potentially as what it could be if we were only collecting it at the time when we have the improvements in the ground, we have people beginning to live there, and we need to make sure that they are able to be completed by the developer. If they leave, we have the funds in place to repair or replace anything that is damaged or not done correctly during that 12-month warranty period. So that is the proposal here. And I'll walk you through a few examples to hopefully highlight this for everybody to kind of see how this would work, okay? So the first example is a actual single-family development. This is the Providence subdivision up in the northeast corner of the city of Longmont. This was a single-family development up at Highway 66 and Sundance Drive, right? Yeah. What you're seeing here, just so that people can understand the colors. So this purple reflects under our current process when we received financial securities for this project. It shows when it increased as they went through their different phases of development, and it shows time along the bottom of how long we held those. This line which drops down here, this is when we've reduced securities under our current system and held it through the warranty period. This lighter blue is the newer number that we're talking about holding during the warranty period. And where it's this purple color, this is where this light blue actually starts. So we start getting this lower amount of securities here and slowly increase through the 3 phases, because this project had 3 phases where they had to increase the amounts of funding for us, and then we slowly dropped the amounts as they went through and were granted construction acceptance building permits were eligible. So under our current process for this development, we held almost $3 million on this project. We held it for almost over 2 years, 2 years and a few months, and we reduced it ultimately to $571,000 roughly dollars, and we held that again for another 6 years. So we held all of that money for at various levels for almost 8.3 years. The estimated cost to the developer for just the loss of their money and the fees they had to pay to give us the securities to hold, we estimate at just under $1 million was the cost for the developer to give us that money at that time. Under this new system, we would collect again at the warranty periods. So every time they finished up and were ready for building permits, they had to increase and give us money. We're actually going to hold more money during the warranty period than they actually had for us originally. If we use this same time frame of 6 years, the total cost for that money for them is about $800,000, which would be a reduction or a savings to them of $190,000 just in cost of financing that money. So when you look at this, every time there is an increase in this line or a decrease, that is a time our staff had to touch and work with a letter of credit or cash return from our finance department back to the developer, a time we had to keep track of all of that. So from an administrative standpoint, a lot of opportunities for mistake. By going to this point, we only have 4 touches. We have the 3 times that we get the money and 1 time when we release it. That's the benefit to staff and to the city, a savings in our time, but we also believe to the development community of a way to try to control some costs for them. I have 2 other examples. I won't go through and read each one of them, but again, just trying to explain how it would work. This was a multifamily project, an affordable project over at Mountain View and Pay Street. This was for apartments, for Centennial Park Apartments. As you can see, we held over $600,000. We held it for 2 years, then warranted for 3. Their total estimated cost was $172,000. We would hold more than what we held previously. So from the standpoint of any risk to the city, we have more money than we did previously. We're going to hold it for the same amount of time, but we're going to hold it at a cheaper cost for them, which would be approximately a savings of $98,000, almost $100,000 savings on an affordable project. And then my last example is South Main Station. This again is at the railroad tracks in Main Street, the apartments where we had Butterball. So if you go through and look at this example for a mixed-use development, the initial security amount just under $600,000. We reduced it to just under $200,000. Held it for a total of almost 6 years. Under this system, we'd hold it for 3. We'd be holding 91. This is the closest one that looks like there is a little bit of a savings here in the first phase. Then it jumps up when they asked for another building. But even at the end, we were still holding more than we currently would under our current system. Total savings to that project over $160,000. So this is just an example of ways that by changing this, we feel could, one, benefit the development community, which hopefully can translate towards some savings for our future residents and home prices or for rent rates, but also as ways to save staff time and money in tracking and keeping these securities safe and secure and accounted for. I can get into more detail on these. Again, we're asking for council direction tonight. We have those in your packet, in your council comm, and I'm here to answer any questions that you have.
Councilor Martin.
Thank you, Mayor Peck. When the council saw this, the beginning of this proposal, I think 2 by 2. I liked it then. I still like it now. We have so much work to do. We need to get so much housing built. And it seems to me that you've hit on the two most important considerations that are holding us up, which is the organizational capacity of this organization, the city of Longmont, and the cost of money to developers, especially now with interest rates much higher, so makes the whole thing harder. So I just want to verify before expressing approval that you have done all of your diligence in terms of risk assessment, and the reason you're proposing this is that it doesn't increase the city's risk.
Mayor Peck, Councilmember Martin, great question and something that I think does bear to be spoken to. You know, I've worked for the city almost 24 years and been doing development review all that time. During my time, we've only had 2 instances where we had to go in and actually lien properties because of a loss of letter of credit, but it was not because of a developer's fault. It was because the banks during the Great Recession, when the feds took over those banks, they would not honor those letters of credit anymore. So we have not had a problem with having to go in and fix these developments. Out of the 24 years that I've worked here, you know, this system is still putting up monies, and as you saw in these cases, is putting up more money than they currently would, but there's still a savings to those projects. So any of the risks that we have, I don't see that we're taking on more, and in many cases, we're gonna have more money than we would have originally to fix something if it went wrong.
Excellent, okay. I mean, I just want to tell everybody, this is the kind of outside the lines thinking that allows us to improve our processes and make it easier for us to receive our objectives or achieve our objectives, and doesn't cost anything. So you have made 6 proposals. I understand I'm not the most expert council member in terms of development processes, and so I would defer to another council member who raised objections, but for my part, I think this is a fine plan, and I would tend to approve all 6 of your proposals.
Thank you.
Mayor Pro Tem Rodriguez.
Thank you, Mayor Peck. So if I remember from a previous meeting, at least it might have been a 2-on-2 or a 2-on, one of those breakout meetings, that in certain occasions, the city would finish infrastructure improvements if necessary in certain cases. Is that correct?
If we needed to, we would. That's the whole reason why we have the securities, is to make sure those are completed. Yes, sir.
Okay, and so therefore, to me, when we talk about the optional, the options that you gave, besides the 3 recommendations, the 3 options, it makes sense to me that it's silly for the city to involve itself in securities in and of itself when we would be finishing those for a private developer. We finish those for ourselves as it goes, right? And so I would prefer that we adopt the 3 options along with the 3 recommendations as far as the administrative process. And while I'm not a big believer that the savings, which to me are somewhat nominal for private development as far as this is concerned, I do believe that the savings to the administrative process and to the staff, as well as to either LHA or city developments, would be much more worthwhile. And so I will support both the 3 recommendations as well as the 3 options. Thank you.
So seeing no one else
If I
in
can
queue.
jump in real quick.
Sure.
I think that was actually a good point. And when we look at the work that we've been doing on attainable housing, obviously and affordable, but in attainable, 100,000 makes the difference in the pro forma when we're looking at it, and how we're trying to manage gaps in there, and so we're definitely seeing that in the attainable world's probably a decent tool to bring to the table. And I wanted to bring that out because that's still not affordable in the way we have the code set up, and we're bringing stuff on that too.
So I'm going to bring this down to the level that I understand, which is basically I look at this as a damage deposit in a sense, in that instead of having them pay up front, we will have them pay after it passes code to keep for the 12 months warranty period.
Yes.
Yep. Okay. That makes sense to me, actually. It's kind of like what we did with the COPs, in a sense, in that we didn't have them, they don't get the COP until after, never mind. It's in my head, but I can't put it out there right. My question is on exempt city projects on the optional. When you, we are going to have developers make those city projects, develop the city projects, correct? So I'm confused as to why we wouldn't want to have securities on city projects, because it'll be a developer putting in our city, the sidewalks, streets, etc., for the public amenities. I don't understand that part.
So Mayor Peck, if I understand, the concern is that if I have, for example, I'm going to build the golf course maintenance facility and I'm going to have a water line that goes through there that's public, we're going to hire a development company to come in and build that for the city.
Right.
But they're going to be under a purchasing contract with the city to build that. And so any monies that we release to them would only be released after they have completed the work per that contract, versus having to have that money to pay that contractor sitting in one fund and then saying that we have to have security for the water lines that are going to be put in sitting in a different fund. So now we need more money because we have to have the money to pay for the work, then we have to have money to secure. And we're saying it's all one set of funds, and we're not going to release it until we've inspected and make sure as the owner that it's correct. So the risk in my mind is no worse than we would have to experience if someone didn't fulfill that contract.
Okay, I understand that now. I would definitely give direction to adopt the recommended areas. Is there anyone else in the queue? Well, yes, I move that we adopt the recommended options. And it's been seconded by Councilor McCoy. I'm going to open it up for discussion. Councilor Waters.
Thanks, Mayor Peck. I support this motion to approve these three. I just want to clarify, will there be an opportunity for a second motion from other council members on the other three optional?
Mm-hmm.
All right.
Seeing no one else in the queue, let's vote. That passes unanimously. Councilor Martin.
I'd like to move adoption of the optional suggestions.
Second.
So it's been moved by Councilor Martin to adopt the optional recommendations, and seconded by Mayor Pro Tem Rodriguez. Oh, I have My hesitation is I totally understand and believe in the affordable housing. That makes total sense. It was the middle one that I was concerned with, but it's good. So that vote carries unanimously. Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate your time tonight.
So now we are in consideration and discussion of proposals for spending one-time funds, including those from the sale of the Denver Broncos or the Metro Stadium District. The first one is consider allocation of $50,000 from Denver Broncos money to the Longmont Latinx Voices. Yes, we're going to go with an up-down vote because that, in our pre-session, that is what we said we would do. So do I have a motion? Councilor McCoy.
It wasn't a motion, it was, thank you, Mayor Peck. It was just a comment about this. Can I make a comment?
Of course.
Okay. It's, I don't want I don't want to come across as unfair, so my concern is that I think that maybe one of the best things that I myself have struggled with is trying to figure out what's fair. And as much as I really support the Longmont Latinx Voices and doing this, and understand that they need to get their money right now so that they can go ahead and move forward in getting some of the supplies for the kids. I don't want to come across as unfair to other groups that might be interested in also pursuing the other part of this. And so I don't want my vote to be misunderstood.
Okay. Thank you for that clarification. Do I have a motion? Mayor Pro Tem Rodriguez.
Thank you, Mayor Peck. We had a conversation last Tuesday about how this would go tonight, so I'm just going to straight move the consideration of allocation of $50,000 from Denver Broncos money, stadium district money, to Longmont Latinx Voices.
Let's vote. I'm sorry. So this motion failed with myself, Councilor Martin, Councilor Rodriguez, and Councilor Waters in opposition, Councilor Yarbrough, Councilor Hidalgo-Fearing, and Councilor McCoy in favor. I will explain this vote later in the process. So now we are on the second part of this. Consider allocation of $500,000 of the Denver Broncos money. Councilor Waters, before I read this, you had mentioned in our pre-session that do you want to do that now? Okay, I am going to call on you to do that.
Thanks. I had indicated that I'd like to bifurcate this, right? So this has been in front of you before, so I don't want to withdraw it, but I will. Can I make two motions?
Yes.
The first motion would be to allocate $500,000 from the money from the sale of the stadium. I think that's really the sale of the stadium, to allocate or direct that money to expand the children's gallery at the museum.
I'll second that. So the motion is to allocate $500,000 of the stadium, Metro Stadium District dollars to the Longmont Museum. And that was I seconded that, and the motion was made by Councilor Waters. So let's vote. Whoops. And that fails with myself, Councilor Martin, Councilor Rodriguez, Councilor Yarbrough, Councilor Hidalgo-Fearing, and Councilor McCoy in opposition, and Councilor Waters for.
Ready? So this may be totally, well, it is totally perfunctory, but I'm going to move it anyway. The language in the resolution was specific. When I originally talked about this or proposed this, I was proposing that we use mineral royalties from, that we weren't going to have to pay developers from the renegotiated agreement. The language here reflects what would be general fund eligible mineral royalties. So the motion is to allocate $1.5 million from general fund eligible royalty income to fund expansion of the Children's Gallery and the museum.
Councillor Martin.
Thank you, Mayor Peck. I would just like to say that I like this idea much better.
Councillor Martin, before we discuss this, we need a second.
Oh, second.
Thank you. So it's been, the motion has been made to use a portion of the $1.5 million of the oil and gas revenue for the museum expansion, made by Councillor Waters, seconded by Councillor Martin. We are now open for discussion.
Okay, now I still have the floor, yes?
Yes.
Okay. I like this for several reasons. I wanted the windfall money because I have great hopes that we can, with proper oversight, use the windfall money for something that will have an effect this summer. And while, unlike a certain speaker that we had in the public invited to be heard, there is in fact a full plan, a full development plan for the Children's Gallery. So that you know, there's no lack of oversight, there's no lack of planning. It's just that this is a capital project that was unfunded, and it would be good to fund it. And I especially like it because if passed, it would, I believe, and I would like the city manager to correct me if I'm wrong, it would buy down the cost by a bit of the ballot measure that we are considering. Would it not? I mean, it's only a few percent probably, but why not?
Buy down the cost that was projected in there. I think it was 9 million, 10 million, so buy it down by. And I will clarify what's eligible for oil and gas. You know, they're still working through all the details on the actual dollar amount. So, for
Yes.
general fund.
Right. So I am going to vote for this because you know, we still have details to work out, so it's not immediate windfall money. But I like the idea of supporting the museum and making the burden on the taxpayers to vote yes on the museum on the ballot this fall a little lighter. Those are my reasons for allocating this or approving this, but not the other one.
Councillor McCoy.
Thank you, Mayor Peck. I like the idea of supporting the museum too, but I would like to hear a little bit more from the city manager in regards to when we're talking about eligible mineral royalties. I thought some of this was supposed to be going back to help with the open space. You're fine.
There are different funds that comprise the oil and gas revenues. So we have a portion of the revenues that go to the water fund, a portion that go to the open space fund, a portion that go to the general fund. Am I forgetting a fund, Becky? Storm drainage, sewer. And so what Becky's doing is working all of those numbers to go what goes where. And then what we're talking about here is just the general fund component of that.
Is this the same general fund component that was earlier proposed, or is this something else that you guys have worked out over time on the, you know, crunching the numbers and everything? Or is this, because Councilmember Waters has brought this discussion before about $1.5 million. And before, there was some sort of confusion maybe there.
So the genesis was, and Councilmember Waters can correct me if I'm wrong, but it all started with, as part of the oil and gas agreement that we had with Top Operating in Cub Creek, where we were moving the drilling outside of the city limits, and we were closing a number of wells. Part of that agreement, there was $3 million involved in that. Based on renegotiations that the council acted on, that $3 million was no longer, we had it programmed to go back to Top Operating. Based on those renegotiations, those $3 million no longer had to go back. And I think that was the genesis of Councilmember Waters' motion. It was in that then when we had the question about the use of the revenues based on the funds that actually owned the property, which Eugene, I believe, answered that question. And so I believe that the motion that's on the table right now is for the general fund component of those revenues, of the oil and gas revenues. And that's when I also indicated we're still fine tuning the number in terms of what that actual number will be.
Okay, thank you.
Councilor Hidalgo Faring.
So, well, my question, I guess for Harold or Becky is it premature to hold this vote right now until we have the numbers?
So you can have the vote, and if the number comes in less, we can do it. We think it may be less now. It's around 900,000, 868. But we're still working through the detail. I want to make sure the details are correct on it before we actually have the actual number. If council directed to do this and the number was lower, we would come back and go, the number's lower.
Seeing no one else in the queue, I do want to say that this really isn't, correct me if I'm wrong, but based upon the conversation we just had, that this really isn't windfall money. It's money that, okay, yeah. So, seeing no one else in the queue, let's vote. So that passes with myself, Councilor Yarbrough, and Councilor Hidalgo Faring against. I do want to say that I think that the museum does need these monies, and for me, the proper way to have done this would be to bring this up in our budgeting process that we're going to go through this summer and direct staff to find the 1.5 million in our budgeting process. I think that would have been a way to get the exact dollar amount that they want. So, Mayor Pro Tem Rodriguez.
Thank you, Mayor Peck. Based on the votes that we've taken tonight, I would like to move that we allocate the entire $980,000 and change of the Stadium Metro District allocation to Children, Youth, and Family Services.
Councilor McCoy?
My rationale for this is that that way we can get groups like the LLLV to apply and get that money to them as quickly as possible. That's my goal. Thank you.
Seeing no one else in the queue, let's vote. I'm sorry, that was moved by Mayor Pro Tem Rodriguez, seconded by Councilor McCoy. So that carried unanimously with Councilor Waters in opposition. What? It looked unanimous on the screen, except for that one red dot. So since we're still on this subject, it was always told to us by staff that when we make motions, we don't really give very good direction as to what is supposed to go, or sometimes it's confusing. So I am going to make another motion and and I'm going to pass out my motion to the counselors because there's 4 bullet points here, and I apologize for my edits. So, so you can follow along my motions. When we discuss it, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. Did you get one? So, I am going to move. Are we, you still have the voting up? Are we?
Because you're about to make a motion.
Oh, okay. You're just before, you're so fast. So I'm going to move that we direct the youth services staff to create a community involvement plan that amplifies our youth voices in discussing what to do with the stadium proceeds. That's my first bullet point. I also, and that the staff should use their data, which was already collected from recent focus groups, as well as Councilmember Hidalgo Faring's survey data as a starting point. Then I direct the youth service staff to create a plan that includes using the next mayor's quarterly meetup in April as the kickoff, inviting voices of Longmont's youth to let us know how they would like the city to use the stadium funds. And the last bullet point is, with the input from the April kickoff, staff should bring back any future community involvement plans to council, as well as their recommendations for the funds after the community involvement plans are complete. So, Councilor Martin.
Thank you, Mayor Peck. I would like a better explanation of what voices of authority there are in the mayor's quarterly meetup and what happens there.
It is just a quarterly meetup that I have once a quarter and have a topic of discussion. The first one was housing. The second was transportation, and I can't remember the third, but the fourth one was I had a community transportation project.
Okay, I remember those, but although I didn't attend them, but I was not sure that that was the program that you were referring to.
It is.
Okay, thank you for the clarification.
Mayor Pro Tem Rodriguez.
Thank you, Mayor Peck. I think that generally speaking, these should be taken separately as far as motions are concerned. I don't think you can really roll them, in my opinion, especially because some I disagree with and some I don't.
Is there a consensus that these should be 4 separate motions? Councilor McCoy shaking his head. Mayor Pro Tem shaking his head. Or said, okay. With that, you know, if there's not a consensus that we do this, I'm going to leave it as 1. What we can do is amend this motion if you're not comfortable with one or more of the bullet points. We can amend the motion. Seeing no, oh, there you are, Councilor Martin.
I think that the mayor would have to phrase the amendment because it's not that clear to me what is intended by this. My concern is that we have a perfectly good grant process, and the fact that this is out of time with that grant process doesn't change the fact that it's a perfectly good process, and that it includes both the things that we're missing from the public proposals there, which is diligence on making sure that the implementation plan was thorough, and also diligence on reporting as the grant is implemented and the project that is funded by the grant is carried out. So it's not clear to me that these 4 points leave that good process in place?
The point of this, actually, it was to your point, Councillor Martin, when you were saying that we didn't have enough community involvement, that there was no process. So I took your comments basically saying that turn it over to youth services because they do have a grant, they do have a process already in place, they know what they're doing. Open it up so that we have youth voices, both in the first one in April, that the voices of the youth be invited to come and tell us what they want. And then the plan on the fourth bullet point is that the youth services bring back any future community involvement plans that they are going to put together to have more community involvement, more voices, bring back to us the recommendations to council of all of the input that they get as to what the youth want this money to be spent on, and what they are going to grant, which ones they recommend and which ones they will grant.
The youth are going to.
No, the youth aren't going to grant anything.
Oh, well, that's what I thought you said.
I could have. I could have said that. But it would be up to Youth Family Services and basically staff.
So I think then what you are saying is that you would, I mean, obviously bullet 1 and 2 happen anyway. It's not like we can hide the data from Youth and Family Services that council members Yarbrough and Hidalgo Faring have collected. And so, I mean, I think that they would be very well advised to use that information regardless of whatever else happens. I like the idea of a youth services community involvement plan, but I would like it to be explicitly stated that the standard oversight process would be applied.
I'm sorry, explain that.
My youth, when Human Services makes grants to nonprofit agencies in the budget process, there is an application rubric, there is an evaluation process that is at least partially quantified. I will say, you know, I'm not an expert in it, but it's, you know, it's that much. And then there is an explicit reporting process that allows the staff to verify that the thing that was granted for was accomplished, or if it was not accomplished in some partial way, then at least, you know, we would know that outcome.
The youth services does that. That is why I want to turn it over to them. They have all of those processes already in place.
So you don't think that there needs to be an amendment that says that?
Point of order, there's no second.
Okay. Well, I'm not going to second it.
Okay. So let's call on Mayor Pro Tem Rodriguez.
Oh, are you done?
Yeah, I'll be done.
All right, sorry about that, Councilmember Martin. I just wanted to point that out before we continue discussing it. My whole point of making the motion that I did previously that did pass was to partially avoid continuing to go down a very craggy rabbit hole. And I believe that bullet points 3 and 4, not that they're numbered, but the second 2 bullet points would lead us right back down that rabbit hole. So I would not support the motion as seconded. I agree with the first 2 bullet points and feel that that could easily be incorporated into whatever process Children, Youth, and Family Services takes to move forward with that allocation of money. Because I know that there's probably also a timeline with which that money needs to be spent. And no.
No, just reported. The plan has to be reported by
Just
September.
reported. Okay, very good. So in essence, though, I feel that the first 2 bullet points I agree with Councilmember Martin in that I will vote for it. If that's what the motion is with the first two, I'll vote for that. If it's the entire thing, I'm not going to vote for it because I don't want, again, like I said, to go back down this rabbit hole as far as the council members deciding one way or another where this allocation truly goes prescriptively. Because as I said on Tuesday, I don't feel that we really necessarily have the expertise to prescriptively make these allocations. My opinion has been, I think, pretty straightforward over the last few months. So that's just as far as this current motion is concerned, where I stand.
I wouldn't mind a friendly amendment to it to remove the second half of it, if you would like make that amendment. Okay, this looks like okay, I'm not sure it's gonna, it did. There you go, Dr. Waters.
Thanks, Mayor Peck. I understand the motivation, and
Okay.
and I think it's honorable, and you know it reflects a sensitivity. I guess I just wondering, since we've already directed the money go to family, youth, and children, and the only reason I voted no is I just, as a matter of principle, I think one-time money we should be using in capital projects. But that said, is it possible? With what we've already done, the Human Services Department already has a process.
Yes.
But it goes through our Human Services Board. There are 5 or 6 categories. I mean, it's possible they could add a category and just fold this into the regular process, because what we're about to do, they're going to replicate a process that they already go through in the months of October and November, right? We approved those in December. This would enhance. There's a $1.4 million budget that we've approved for 2023. This would take that from 1.4 up to almost 2.4, right? Just a few dollars short of that. And they could add a category, whatever they thought was the right thing to do. My point is, this is a lot of additional work for folks that already have full-time jobs. When they have a process and a time frame, and would be, you know, they would still be in control of the process, and then it would come back to the council for approval in December. It just seems to me, in terms of efficiencies and the honoring the intent of getting money to that part of the organization, and then to use their processes so it's not a duplication of effort that they're going to have to go through anyway when we get into the fall.
The point is, thank you for those comments. The point is, the Family and Youth Services, this is what they do. They work with the youth, specifically in our community. And they already do programming. They know how to do this.
So,
It's what they do. So please.
if I can jump in, we have 2 grant processes that we use. One in Health and Human Service funding, and one in Children, Youth, and Families
Children, Youth, and Families.
Services, and they're very similar in terms of the rubric that we use. And so I think what I'm hearing is Health and Human Service model. We have a model very similar that currently exists in Children, Youth, and Family Services.
That's perfect. Thank you. Councilor McCoy.
Thank you, Mayor Peck. I was going to I am agreeing with Councilmember Rodriguez about his points there, and I was going to ask for Christina Pacheco to come down and explain exactly what our city manager just explained, so that the general public has an idea. But I am still concerned that groups that were out here, like the Longmont Latino and Latina voices, are going to be put off for a year, and that's not something I wanted to see happen. So I wouldn't support it in this motion in its current state.
Christina, do you mind explaining that grant process or exactly how this would work? Or, it is kind of unfair to ask you that, to be honest, because we're deciding whether to put all of the stadium funds to the family youth.
That's our,
Yeah, but, okay.
Mayor Peck and members of council, Christina Pacheco, Human Services Director for the City of Longmont. So earlier you heard Longmont Youth Council talk about their grant-making process. And so they do have a process, an application. The basis of their application is really asset-based. They want to make sure that that youth are involved in the programs that they fund. They want to make sure that that adults are invested in supporting youth in their programs, and they ask for reports at the end of that. We can make sure that that the reporting structure aligns with the Human Services funding. We can look at how those reports can align, and it shouldn't be any more work to do that. We can look at getting that process automated to make it easier also for the individuals applying for the funds as well. It shouldn't be any more work.
Thank you. This sounds perfect.
Sure.
So I will just I know that staff wants direction on the motion. And so I am going to amend my motion to only do the first two parts. I'll restate them for the people in the audience. I move that we direct the youth services staff to create a community involvement plan that amplifies our youth voices in discussing what to do with the stadium proceeds, and that staff should use their data already collected from recent focus groups, as well as Council Member Hidalgo Faring's survey data as a starting point. So, Councilor Martin.
Thank you. I'm sorry that you made the trip up the hill, Director Pacheco, because I have a question for you. Because I was not aware that the processes had two names, so of course we should use the youth services process, and I hope there was no confusion about that. My other question is about agility and organizational capacity. So the question that seems unresolved to me is whether these applications that we know will come to you and that you will handle in a way that you already know how to handle,
right,
will be processed over the summer in the regular budget process, thereby eliminating anything from happening this summer, or whether you would be able to process the grants, the applications as they come in, with the hope that something could be done this summer because we feel that we have an urgent need for that to happen. So that's my question.
Councilmember Martin, I think it's feasible that we could process them as they come in. You heard from Youth Council earlier that their grant process happened in January and they awarded them in February. Pretty quick turnaround time. We can look at talking with them. Council Member Hidalgo Faring is the representative. I think it's fair to say that we can talk with Jenny as well to see about putting this on their upcoming agenda make it a priority item, and look at having that be a priority for the summer. Usually in the summer, things are a little slower, so I think it might be really good timing, and that's something that we can look into. So I believe that the timing is really good right now.
Okay, then excellent. Do you need additional direction other than the mayor's amended motion for that, or would that just go along with it and we could get going at speed?
I think that's sufficient.
Thank you.
So can I have a motion for my amended, a second, I'm sorry, for my amended motion? So Counselor Hidalgo-Faring still seconded that. Let's vote, please. She voted. So that passes unanimously. Thank you, and thank you for the discussion. So now Sandy Cedar is up. We are doing the 2023 legislative bills recommended for city council position.
Mayor Peck and members of council, Sandy Cedar, Assistant City Manager, and I forgot to put these on your desk, so they're coming around right now. I know I sent them to you ahead of time, but here's the printed copy. We have two bills for consideration today. The first one is House Bill 231184, concerning certain low-income housing property, clarifying and expanding the property tax exemption for property acquired through nonprofit housing providers. And they make the recommendation for strictly charitable low-income housing purposes. Basically what this does is this is going to increase the tax exemption from housing that's provided by nonprofit groups that are providing it for AMI under 80% and raising that to 100%. So this really moves towards your attainable housing goals. And so the staff recommends City Council support House Bill 231184.
There any discussion? Seeing none, I'm going to move that we support House Bill 231184. Second. Let's vote. So that passes unanimously.
Thank you, Mayor. The second bill is House Bill 231190. This one is crazy cool. I don't know if it's going to pass, but this is concerning the right of first refusal to purchase qualifying multifamily residential property by a local government. What it does is it requires any multifamily housing that's going up on the market to make that available for local government to be able to purchase for housing, for low-income housing. Of course, it's just right of first refusal, and the municipality can actually move that off to a housing authority if they would like to. So this seems like an incredible opportunity. Like I said, I'm not sure that it would pass, but certainly staff recommends that City Council supports House Bill 231190 because it would certainly give us a lot more leverage in this market.
So I'm going to move that. Well, Councilor Martin.
Thank you, Mayor Peck. I just have one question about it because right of first refusal always confuses me, especially having been through the Airport Advisory Board's several misinterpretations of right of first refusal. So when that happens, this is essentially like a private transaction. The seller has to offer it to the city. Does this seller get to provide a list price? And is the first refusal involve paying the list price? Is that the way it works, or what?
The offer must be economically substantially identical to any third-party offer that will also preserve affordable housing. And that's the way that they're determined kind of what fair market value is in this case.
Okay, I think so. All right, thank you. I will move acceptance, support.
Okay, so that motion, I think that was a motion by Councilor Martin to support HB 231190, seconded by Councilor McCoy. Let's vote. Thank you. That passes unanimously.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Now we're at the Executive Compensation and Performance Review recommendations. Molly. Joanne. Oh my gosh, I need to go home.
Good evening, Mayor and members of council. Joanne Zias, Human Resources, Chief Human Resources Officer. I need to go home too. Here this evening with some recommendations in regard to how we conduct our performance appraisals for the city manager and the city attorney. We have had an executive session to talk about that topic, and what I provided in council's information this evening is some suggestions for how that might look, and just here to listen to feedback and see if we can get a system and a process ready for this year.
Do councilors have any comments or suggestions? Councilor Waters.
Thanks, Mayor Peck. Let me say, first of all, thanks for getting this back to us and an opportunity to talk about it. Here's what is a little confusing to me or puzzling. When we first got started in this conversation, at least from my perspective, I obviously can't speak for anybody else, part of my frustration for as long as I've been on the council is that the performance appraisal process for these two fine gentlemen is always a retrospective, right? We have no conversation really about goals and objectives, you know, what's worth accomplishing, how would you know if you'd accomplished it, whether it's a metric or simply a milestone. I mean, there's some things that, you know, are not so easily measured, but are worth, you know, paying attention to what the progress, you know, the milestones are towards the ultimate progress. I thought all along that where we would end up is with a process that kicks off with some conversation with the city manager and the city attorney about what they think is worth accomplishing this year. Not everything, but in that, you know, in the concept, the construct of the pyramid. What are those things in the top of the pyramid that are the most important, right? Both for the individuals and for the city. And a chance for us to talk together and with the leadership about what does that mean for us in terms of support, you know, and what do we do together moving forward? So when I look at the timeline, you know, I look at this and I see September is kind of wraps up the process this year with no conversation between September and January of 2024. And I'm not likely going to be in that conversation, but it seems to me that's the time where there would be conversation about what's worth accomplishing in 2024, just based on what we've learned through the year. And if I think about this year, we conducted a customer survey or customer satisfaction survey. I can't imagine we went into 2023 with no conversation having occurred about those data. What did we learn from that customer satisfaction survey that might go into the top of that? Because if I recall, homelessness, there were a couple things that would go into the top of that pyramid that are worth accomplishing. We built a budget, right? We built we approved a $414 million budget you all built. But I have to believe that there were goals somewhere in the organization that drove what those budget proposals were. That, you know, they get scored, but at some point in time, we're approving a budget. We don't really talk about goals in relationship to the budget, but we might talk about goals once the budget is adopted to say, these are the goals that drove that budgeting process that came to you that are in the top of that pyramid that are worth accomplishing in the ensuing year, right? You shared with us, Joanne, I put your first and last name, time for me to go home. You did a presentation to us a while back about the workforce and workplace of the future with big ideas about the things that you need and, with your colleagues to be addressing yourselves to in terms of the recruitment and retention of personnel, right? So part of that work, along with the other data you collected, really drove what was the biggest priority in terms of the general fund budget, and that was personnel, right? So what it seemed to me, there ought to be a goal in there someplace about recruitment and about retention and turnover as a metric, right? Since personnel and compensation was the biggest driver in the budget, there ought to be a goal that we could talk about that we're trying to accomplish as a result of what we did with that biggest driver in the budget. But this process offers no opportunity to have any of those conversations. There's no conversation about a goal until January of 2024. I just can't believe that this team is going to get to with their talent on this staff, going to get to the end of this fiscal year, have gone through all those processes, and not have had any conversation about goals to go on the top of that pyramid that's worth this group being in conversation with those fellows about. How is that possible? That's what's confusing to me, because I thought that was the whole point of what we were talking about. And maybe it's just me. But,
Joanne,
but this process puts us right back largely into a retrospective.
So Mayor Peck and Councilmember Waters, if you don't mind me helping to answer
No,
this one.
yeah,
I think
anybody,
the toughest, so we're in a weird juxtaposition because I feel like you generally create your goals at the beginning of the year, particularly after an election. It gives a month for people to kind of get themselves, into the role of council, and then you usually have your council retreat at the beginning of the year. We can't set compensation at the end of the year because the budget process is over and there's not funding there. So it's a very weird, the timeline that we're laying out right here is really based mostly on when do we need to know a number for compensation in order to include it in the budget. And that's the August-September piece.
I get that.
So if in August and September, you are evaluating,
I'm good with all those steps, Sandy, that run
up to that point.
It's that there's no conversation between September and January.
There should still be conversation between September and January, because oftentimes you will be having new council members that are joining in November. And so that's part of that other timing, is that you're going to have new leadership and new people coming in during that period of time.
I have no doubt that in a January retreat, there would be, and this is the last comment, then I'll shut up. I have no doubt in a January 2024 retreat, there'd be a lot of conversation about what council goals might be. But I'm not talking about council goals. I'm talking about goals for the CEO and for the chief legal officer in the organization to lay those out. And to some degree, those, it would seem to me, should influence what we think about our goals to be. But there's no place for that conversation. There's no at least identified date time frame for that conversation to occur. That the goal setting in January would be for the council. I can't believe there isn't goal setting that occurs for senior management between the end of August or into September and the end of the year.
We could absolutely add a meeting in there that talks about it. I would argue that the budget is that document and does give those goals around what we're anticipating and thinking is going to happen in the next year. But certainly in the time frame, if it's helpful to add something right around that budget time frame to say, here are the goals that accompany this budget, from our executives, then certainly that's something we could add and amend into this time frame.
I think the thing that I would say is, from my perspective, if we did it, it would be better in December, because November, if we figured out how the council dates had changed, so we don't bring the new council members now until it's ratified. So that's the end of November, first week of December now. So then, for me, that's when I'm going to want the conversation, is with the actual sitting council that is going to be looking at it that year. So I think we could plug that in as a conversation in December, and then that would inform the January conversation in the retreat.
That also gives you a little more flexibility to be able to have the retreat. Sometimes it does work in January and sometimes it works in March. So, yeah, that would be fine.
Okay, Councilor Martin.
Thank you, Mayor Peck. I think that this is needlessly complex, because, and I understand that maybe the council wants to measure people on the budget or in accomplishment of setting council direction and goals. But what I'd like to look at is look back at Mr. May's retrospectives that he has written for us, which I've found to be really useful documents. And what those documents essentially say is, if you had asked me at the beginning of this review cycle, these would have been my goals, and here's how I did. And for me, that is the way I always conducted reviews. That is, you have an employee and you talk to them and say, in a year I'm going to review you. Tell me what your goals are for your accomplishments. And we have a little negotiation right then and there, because, sometimes an employee would, say something so ambitious that I knew they were setting themselves up for failure. And otherwise they would say, sometimes I just want to come do my job every day. And I'm thinking, well, you're going to have to do better than that, So sometimes it's a negotiation, but actually I think these are two very responsible people, and we wouldn't have to, they would have a responsible statement of their goals. But it should happen right after the review. And then when the new council is seated, then maybe that information, that discussion can be reviewed with the new council members, and there could be a discussion or modification. But, I think these are our goals on operations, not on policy. I don't want the council to be able to set the bar impossibly high. And sometimes we do that kind of stuff. I think everybody would nod and say, yeah, sometimes we do set the bar really high. So I'm interested in the goals that our two senior leadership members set for themselves. And there shouldn't be a big gap. And so I just think that this is a much simpler approach, and that's all we need to do.
Seeing no other comments in the queue, no other questions or comments. Mayor Pro Tem.
Thank you, Mayor Peck. I believe that my concerns were surrounding, more specifically, the city attorney and how the city attorney's office works within the organization, and so that speaks to the 360 evaluation, right? That was what I felt was lacking in our performance evaluations, and I think that the example that the sample that you have provided for us is short enough that it's not cumbersome, and also would probably give us a good idea surrounding a performance evaluation for somebody who has many more obligations than just their council to the sitting city council, if you will, S versus C councils, right? Anyway, I have not really had a problem with the city manager's evaluation personally, because we have, as I think stated before, a lot more one-on-one work with the city manager versus the city attorney. So I'm pretty happy with the samples that you provided, as well as the recommendations, and so that's just where I'm at. I understand the goal setting that Councilmember Waters and Councilmember Martin referenced, and I think that would be very helpful in the process, in a year-long look at it, from December to when we eventually go through the process. So I just wanted to make, for the other council members who haven't yet chimed in, where I'm sitting on that.
Do any other counselors have comments or recommendations? Seeing none, I do believe that you want direction on this.
That would be helpful.
That would be very helpful. So can I have a motion, the direction that they're looking at, let me get this right back here. Adopt these recommendations or decline to adopt them?
And Mayor, I would say that, I think we have a new one on the table, which is adopt the recommendations with the addition of the goal-setting meeting in December.
Okay.
Or don't adopt the recommendations and go based on just goal to goal, year to year. That's kind of what I heard.
Mayor Pro Tem.
Thank you, Mayor. I move adoption of the recommendations with the addition of the goal setting in December/January, whatever is time pertinent.
So it has been moved by Mayor Pro Tem Rodriguez to accept with the recommendations the executive compensation and performance review recommendations. And it's been seconded by Councilor Hidalgo Ferry. Let's vote. Yes, please.
Thanks. Just to be clear, the expectation is that there would be some conversation in December, likely, or in that time frame, about what the goals are. Thanks.
Okay. Thanks for that clarification. That passes unanimously. Thank you, Joanne.
Thank you.
Okay, we are at final call. Public invited to be heard. I see one public. So seeing no one that wants to comment, we are going to move on to mayor and council comments. Mayor Pro Tem, no, I'm sorry, Councilor McCoy.
Thank you, Mayor Peck. I just want to thank all those first responders that showed up to save life and limb on Sunday at the Mountain View and Francis Street. It was a terrible situation, and I really very much appreciate all their hard work and everything to save the houses on the backside of that alley as well as the other units in that complex. And then I also want to thank all of those that reached out to me and my family after the loss of my younger brother who passed away on Friday, 17th of February. Thank you for all your kind words and prayers.
Councilor Waters.
Thanks, Mayor Peck. We received an email today from Don with a link in it to an NPR podcast. I think we all got an email from a resident the day before who was bringing to our attention this podcast because she had heard it, listened to it, and was so moved by what she heard that she took the time to write. And the podcast is with the author of a book, former police officer who is now professor in a California post-secondary institution, who's really profiled or shared case studies of 3 communities and their police departments and their approach to policing that exemplify what policing ought to look like in this country. And Longmont is at the top of the list. The testimonial in that to what is different in this town, based on Mike's leadership to start. Where's Zach? Is Zach still here? And what Zach is continuing to do. I heard a presentation from Andy Feaster today, which was inspiring. I heard Zach do a similar presentation. But I just want to say thank you, and it was great recognition. And I hope everybody in this town listens to it and understands just how fortunate we are to live in a town that it takes this approach to policing and public safety.
So thank you, and thank you for that, Councilor Waters, to bring that up for us. Councilor Martin.
Yes, I would just like to say the Longmont Economic Development Partners had their summit today, and there were a lot of good things said there. I think it gave an even-handed and important forecast for the prospects of Longmont. That we have come out of the pandemic recession, that we are adapting well, and that the right things are happening. We had 2 panel discussions, and both of them focused on some really important things. And what really I think came out of it is that while housing is our biggest need, that we have, that in order to build a complete city, especially a landlocked city, a circular city, even though we aren't very circular, you need essentially two other sides of the pillar or the triangle to get to the apex. And those two things are transit and amenities. Because if you're going to live in a dense urban environment, it has to be livable, and livable is important. So because it was the EDP's summit meeting where that was discussed, and because the EDP did something really important with great agility over the weekend, they sent out to their board members and took an email vote voting to support the idea of building as a public-private partnership, a Center for Arts and Entertainment in Longmont that we're considering putting on the ballot. And the reason that they supported it is because of all the things on the ballot. It's got two attributes that are different. One of them is that it has the potential for an economic upside. It brings revenue into the city, whereas parks are great. We love them. We love that we have all this green space, but they don't bring revenue into the city. They cost money to maintain. And the other thing is that because of the public-private partnership and the deferred vote, which I think was an awfully clever idea, whoever thought of it, it wasn't me, but it was a great idea. It's easier on the voters. We essentially would be, if the private partner succeeds in raising the money that they've promised to bring to this, then the public gets this amenity for half price, in essence. And so I just want to thank the Longmont Economic Development Partners for realizing this, realizing that we have a three-sided triangle of housing, transit, and amenities that we have to bring forward together with Longmont. And I think it's a great start to their year.
Councilor Yarbrough.
Thank you, Mayor Peck. I just want to say today is the last day of Black History Month. Remember to celebrate the differences in our community with our kids, with your neighbors. We don't have to be targeted as the other or anything like that. We are all beautiful. So just remember to celebrate all of our differences in our community, and I think that's what makes Longmont very unique. So happy Black History Month.
So, city manager remarks.
Comments, Mayor, Council.
Eugene May, city attorney.
No comments, Mayor.
Thank you. Can I have a motion to adjourn? So it's been made by Councilor McCoy, seconded by Councilor Martin, that we adjourn. All those in favor, raise your hands. Yay, we are adjourned.